Good afternoon, teacher. I'm Sheikh Masuma from class 8A. It's my social science presentation video. You had given me a topic on James Mill, so here it is. I had made the presentation video on James Mill. I hope you like it. So without further ado, let's straight to my presentation video. James Mill was a Scottish historian, economist, political theorist, and philosopher. He is counted among the founders of Ricardian School of Economics. He also wrote the monumental work, The History of British India. He was the first writer to divide Indian history into three parts: Hindu, Muslim, and British, a classification which has proved surpassingly influential in the field of Indian historical studies, but which is seen in recent decades as being deeply problematic. Mill was the father of John Stuart Mill, a noted philosopher of liberalism and utilitarianism and a colonial administrator at the East India Company. James Mill was born on 6th April 1773, North Waterbridge parish of Logie, Perth, Angus, Scotland. He was died on 23 June 1836 at age of 63, Kensington, London, England, UK. His mother, Isabel Fenton, of a family that had suffered from the connection with the Stuart Rising, resolved that he should receive a first-rate education, and after the parish school, they sent him onto the Montrose Academy, where he remained until the unusual age of 17 and a half. He then entered the University of Edinburgh, where he distinguished himself as a great scholar. In October 1789, he was ordained as a minister of the Church of Scotland, but met with little further success. According to John Stuart Mill's autobiography, his father, though educated in the creed of Scotch Presbyterianism, had by his own studies and reflection been early led to reject not only the belief in revelation, but the foundation of what is commonly called natural religion. From 1790 to 1808, while supporting himself by various tutorships, he also pursued various historical and philosophical studies. With little prospect of a career in Scotland, in 1802, he went to London in company with Sir John Stuart of Cadogan, the Member of Parliament for King Cardinshire, and devoted himself to his literary work. From 1803 to 1806, he was editor of an ambitious periodical called the Literary Journal, which tried to give a summary view of all the leading departments of human knowledge. During this time, he also edited the St. James Chronicle, published by the same proprietor. In 1804, he wrote a pamphlet on the corn trade, arguing against a tariff or bounty on the export of grain. In 1805, he published a translation with notes and quotation of an essay on the spirit of influence of the Reformation of Luther by Charles de Vere on the Reformation, and an attack on the alleged vice of the papal system. About the end of this year, he began work on the history of British India, which was to occupy him for 12 years rather than the 3 years or 4 that he had expected. In that year too, he married Harriet Burrow, whose mother, a widow, kept what was then known as an establishment of lunatics in Hoxton. They took a house in Pentonville, where their eldest son John Stuart Mill was born in 1806, the back of number 19 York Street. In 1651, John Milton moved into a pretty garden house in Patay, France. He adopted Bentham's principle in their entirety and determined to devote all his energies to bringing them before the world. Between 1806 and 1818, he wrote for the Anti-Jacobin Review, the British Review, and the Eclectic Review, but there is no means of tracing his contributions. In 1808, he began to write for the more prominent Edinburgh Review, to which he contributed steadily till 1813, his first known article being Money and Exchange. He also wrote on Spanish America, China, Francisco de Miranda, the East India Company, company and freedom of the press. In the annual review for 1808, two articles of his are traced, a review of Fox history and an article on Bantham's law reform, probably his first published notice of Bantham. In 1811, he cooperated with William Allen, a Quaker and chemist, in a periodical called Philanthropist. He contributed largely to every issue, his principal topics being educated, freedom of the press, and prison discipline, under which he expounded Bantham's Panopticon. Now, let me give you some information on the history of British India. The History of British India was published in 1818 and obtained a great immediate and enduring success. It brought about a matching change in the author's fortune, and in the year following, he was appointed an official in India House in the important department of the Examiner of Indian Correspondence. He gradually rose to the ranks until in 1830 he was appointed head of the office with a salary of £1,900, raised in 1836 to £2,000. His great work on economics, The Elements of Political Economy, appeared in 1821. From 1824 to 1826, Mill contributed a number of articles to the Westminster Review, the organ of the Radical Party, in which he attacked the Edinburgh and the Quarterly Review and the Elastical Establishment. In 1829 appeared the Analysis of the Phenomena of the Human Mind. From 1831 to 1833, Mill was largely occupied in the defense of the East India Company. During the controversy attending the renewal of its charter, he being in virtue of his office the spokesman of its court of director. For the London Review, founded by Sir William Molesworth in 1834, he wrote a notable article entitled The Church and its Reform, which was much too skeptical for the time and injured the Westminster Review. Mill himself was an atheist. His last published book was Fragment of Mackintosh. Mill preferred to take a more theoretical approach to social subjects than the empirical one common at the time. His best known literary work is his History of British India, in which he described the acquisition of the Indian Empire by England and later the United Kingdom. He also brings political theory to bear on the delineation of the Hindu civilization and the subjects, the conduct of the actors in the successive stages of the conquest and administration of India to serve criticism. The work itself and the author's official connection with India for the last 17 years of his life effected a complete change in the whole system of governance in the country. Mill never visited the Indian colony, relying solely on documentary material and archival records in compiling his work. This fact led to severe criticism of Mill's History of India by notable economics Amartya Sen. According to Thomas Trotman, j.s.mill highly influential History of British India, most particularly the long essay of the Hindus, comprising 10 chapters in the single most important source of British Indophobia and the hostility of Orientalism. In the chapter titled General Reflections in of the Hindus, Mill wrote, under the glossing exterior of the Hindu lies a general disposition to deceit, a perfidy. According to Mill, the same insincerity, mendacity, and perfidy, the same indifference to the feeling of other, the same prostitution and venality were the conspicuous characteristic of both the Hindus and Muslims. The Muslims, however, were profuse when possessed of wealth and devoted to pleasure. The Hindus, almost always penurious and ascetic, and in truth the Hindu-like image excels in the qualities of slave. Furthermore, similar to Chinese, the Hindus were dissembling, mendacious to an excess which surpasses even the unusual measure of uncultivated society. Both the Chinese and the Hindus were disposed to excessive exaggeration with regard to everything relating to themselves. Both were cowardly and unfeeling. Both were in the highest degree conceited of themselves and full of affected contempt for others, and both were in physical sense disgustingly unclean in their personal houses. So let's move on to the British politics. Mill also played a great part in British politics and was a dominant figure in the establishment of what was called philosophic radicalism. His writing on government and his personal influence among the liberal politicians of his time determined the change of view from the French Revolution theories of the rights of man and the absolute equality of man to the claiming of securities for good government through a wide extension of the franchise. It was under this banner that the Reform Bill was fought and won. His elements of political economy followed up the views of his friend David Ricardo. By 1911, the Encyclopedia Britannica described it as being of mainly historical interest, an accurate summary of views that are now largely discarded. Among the more important points of its thesis are: number one, that the chief problem of practical reform is to limit the increase of population on the assumption that capital does not naturally increase at the same rate as population. And the number two is that the value of things depends entirely on the quantity of labor put into. And the number three is what is now known as the unearned increment of land in the proper project of taxation. Other areas, but his analysis of the phenomena of human mind and his fragment of Macintosh Mill acquired a position in the history of psychology and ethics. He took up the problems of mind very much after the fashion of Scottish Enlightenment, and then represented by Thomas Reid, Douglas Stewart, and Thomas Brown, but in the new start during the part of David Hartley, until more to his own independent thinking. He carried out the principle of association into the analysis of the complex emotional state and the affection, the aesthetic emotions, and the moral sentiment, all of which he devoted to resolve into pleasurable and painful sensation. But the salient merit of the analysis is the constant endeavor after precise definition of terms and clear statement of the doctrines. He had a great effect on Franz Brentano, who discussed his work on his own empirical psychology. The fragment of Macintosh severely criticizes the alleged flimsiness and misrepresentation of Sir James Mackintosh, dissertation on the progress of ethical philosophy, and discusses the foundation of ethics from the author's utilitarian point of view. And that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank you for your time and interest. Thank you so much for your attention, and I really appreciate it.